A few months ago, this sounded like a celebration. More countries, more fans, more football. How could anyone possibly complain about that? But then the tournament actually began, and suddenly, something strange started happening. Some matches looked incredible. Others looked completely one-sided. Players started talking. Coaches quietly admitted what they were seeing. Analysts began asking uncomfortable questions. And buried underneath all the excitement of the biggest World Cup ever was a question FIFA probably hoped nobody would ask. Did football really need 48 teams? Because what looked like FIFA's greatest achievement might also become its biggest World Cup problem. So let's follow the story. Not from the final, not from the trophy, but from the decision that changed the tournament before a single ball was kicked. For almost a century, the World Cup followed a simple formula. The best teams qualified, the weakest stayed home, making the tournament itself feel special. Just getting there meant something. Then FIFA changed everything. Instead of 32 nations, the 2026 World Cup expanded to 48, 16 extra countries, more matches, more television, more tickets, more sponsors, more money. Officially, FIFA called it the most inclusive World Cup in history. The idea sounded impossible to argue against. Why shouldn't more countries have the chance to dream? Why should football belong only to the traditional powers? For millions of supporters around the world, this felt like progress. Countries that had spent decades watching from home finally earned a place on football's biggest stage. And for those fans, this tournament became unforgettable before it even started. So if inclusion was the goal, mission accomplished. But tournaments are judged by what happens on the pitch, and that's where the debate began. Because not every match looked like a World Cup match. Some games were incredibly competitive. Underdogs shocked giants. Smaller nations proved they belonged. But others were over before halftime. Several teams struggled to complete basic passing sequences. Some barely crossed the halfway line. Others looked completely overwhelmed by the speed of elite international football. And suddenly people started asking a different question. Is expanding the tournament making football stronger, or simply making the gap more obvious? Now, ask the players. And the answers become surprisingly balanced. Many stars welcome seeing new countries qualify. After all, every football nation deserves its moment. But several also admitted that recovery has become harder than ever. More teams mean more matches, more travel, less rest. The calendar was already full before the World Cup expanded. Now it is even heavier. Ask the coaches, and you hear something completely different. For smaller nations, the expansion is life-changing. A single World Cup appearance can transform an entire football federation. It attracts sponsors, improves youth development, builds new stadiums, creates opportunities for future generations. But coaches from traditional football powers quietly point toward another concern: preparation, scouting, recovery. Every additional match increases the physical demands of winning the tournament. And history tells us something important. World Cups are rarely won by the most talented team. They're usually won by the healthiest one. Then, ask the fans. And this is where opinions completely split. Some supporters love seeing fresh faces, new flags, new stories, new heroes. After all, nobody expected Morocco to reach the semifinals in 2022. Football has always loved surprises. But others believe too many group matches now feel predictable, because the difference between the strongest and weakest teams can simply be too large. The debate isn't really about football. It's about quality versus opportunity. Can both exist together, or does one always come at the expense of the other? Then there's another group, the one that rarely speaks publicly: broadcasters. For television companies, more matches are simple. More matches mean more advertising, more subscriptions, more viewing hours, more opportunities to sell premium commercial space. Sponsors think the same way. More countries mean more markets. A company that once reached 32 fan bases can now reach 48. That's millions of new customers. From a business perspective, the expansion makes perfect sense. And that's where the conversation changes. Because suddenly, this isn't only about football anymore. It's about economics. Follow the money. The 2026 World Cup features more matches than any tournament in history. That means more tickets sold, more hotel nights, more flights, more broadcasting revenue, more sponsorship opportunities, more merchandise. Everything grows. Except one thing: time. Players still have the same legs, the same muscles, the same recovery limits. The human body doesn't expand just because the tournament does. Which creates perhaps the biggest challenge FIFA now faces. How do you make football bigger without making football worse? And here's the twist: the expansion might not be judged by this World Cup at all. History rarely delivers its verdict immediately. The first World Cup with VAR was heavily criticized. Today, most people accept it. Goal line technology faced skepticism. Now almost nobody wants it removed. Maybe the same thing happens here. Maybe 48 teams become the new normal. Maybe today's criticism disappears within 8 years. Or maybe football reaches a point where more isn't actually better. Because every World Cup has always balanced two competing ideas: finding the very best team in the world and creating unforgettable stories. Sometimes those goals work together, sometimes they don't. That's why this debate isn't ending anytime soon. Supporters will point to the dreams fulfilled. Critics will point to the mismatches. Broadcasters will point to record audiences. Players will point to tired legs. And FIFA will almost certainly point to record revenue. So where does that leave us? Maybe the 48-team World Cup is football's greatest step forward. Maybe it's the beginning of a tournament that's simply become too big for itself. The answer probably won't come from a press conference. It won't come from a financial report. And it definitely won't come from a marketing campaign. It'll come from the football itself. Because over the next few weeks, every upset, every blowout, every exhausted player, and every unforgettable underdog story becomes another piece of evidence. So what do you think? Did FIFA make the World Cup more inclusive, or did it create the biggest problem the tournament has ever faced? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoy football stories that go beyond the scoreline and follow the debate all the way to the bigger picture, subscribe, because the biggest World Cup stories usually aren't the ones happening on the ball. They're the ones changing the game itself.